state regulations. We probably need to say that right up front, but we're gonna try to do just a couple of summaries here. We'll also talk about, there were some questions about pressure in the city. We're also going to talk about pressure regulating valves. Some of the equipment that you see here are models of pressure regulating valves. We'll also talk about some of the items in meter vault and some items that a homeowner, they're required, excuse me, they're required by building code now, but some of the older homes do not have some of the items that we'll talk about, and so there's a little bit of a discussion that goes on there. If we have time, we'll also bring up a map that Rebecca is working on right now. It's a software program that we've talked a little bit about, but we're going to try to do a little bit of a broader explanation about it. It's probably one of the most important tools. Before I turn the time over to Gary, I just want to commend the staff. You've seen part of the staff, a very, very talented group of individuals that deal with the water system. Many of the same people, the technical people, deal with wastewater that are sitting in the room. But I want to just recognize the fantastic staff that we have in water. And there's a lot of staff members that have not participated in it. Just a great group of employees. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gary.
Thanks, Dave. No, we're behind schedule. I know you've been here a long time, so I hope we can entertain you today with these visual aids here. Dave did talk about a little bit about staff, but I'd like to have you recognize each one of them. Ryan York, who you've met before. Ryan is responsible for collecting the water, springs, the wells, and getting that water chlorinated and putting that water into the pipe. Matt, back here at the just by the door, Matt is responsible for taking all that water and putting it through the distribution system, which then gets that water to your houses. Now, if you remember from prior presentations, but we're talking 9 billion gallons throughout the year. So it's a lot of water. Okay, we have Shane Jones back here. Shane has been with the city 15 plus years. He's one of our engineers. How many years, Shane? 12, I'm sorry, I exaggerated. Okay, and Bryce is here from sanitation, just to be supportive of us. Behind him in the red is Rebecca Andrus. She's another one of our engineers. Next to Rebecca is Dave Torgerson. He just came to us this last month from Salt Lake City. And Jimmy, who's our finance guy, is here as well. So these guys are some of the main players, especially Ryan and Matt. What did I say wrong?
Who's this?
Who's you? Oh, Dave. Okay, let me back up. I am sorry.
Keep going. Just keep going. Come on. We got to cover a lot of material here.
Dave, one thing I will say, my first week here, I walked into Dave's office to thank him for the vision that I saw coming back to Provo for his long-term vision of our water system, not just for this year or 10 years, but 50 years out. I was very impressed to see that coming back to Provo. So I hope you appreciate that, the vision that we have. And so the water system that we're going to talk about, we're going to start out right now, and I'm going to have Ryan come up here. What you see here are these hopefully everything that's on this table you have in your front yard, because if you don't have this, you don't have water. Okay, and I have Ryan here. Okay. Some people have this, some people don't. We'll explain what this is in just a second. There's a slide behind us, so I hope you don't mind that we're standing here in front of this. But Ryan, is this okay the way you're going to try?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
So basically, if I can start, water is coming from the street.
Well,
Right here.
I just want to
He wants to be able to show people. This is the pipe coming from the street. And if I could just hold you off just for a second. This is where your meter can is. Okay, this is everything you see here is in the meter can. Okay, the city is responsible for water. This is the meter. The resident is responsible from this part here. Okay, now I'll turn to Ryan. Maybe that's what he's going to say.
And thanks, Gary. We are a little bit backwards, being that this is the main line side. As Gary mentioned, one of my responsibilities is not only collecting and supplying the water, but our tanks, our reservoirs, keeping that water for emergencies, and to maintain an even pressure throughout the entire system. Once the water leaves those reservoirs, we have about 30 of these. It's a pressure regulating valve. And what this valve does is, as the water leaves those tanks and travels from the elevation of those tanks down as far as the airport, it gains pressure. The further elevation drop we have, the higher pressure we have. So we've got about 30 stations throughout Provo that have these valves, larger valves. This is a 4-inch. We've got up to 12-inch regulating valves. I believe it's the red. No, the red's production wells. We don't have PRVs on this slide. So the vaults are located throughout primarily the east bench, but they take that pressure and break it down. So the water comes into the valve. This is our setting. We set the setting that we want, and the water flows through this. I don't know if you guys can see on the back side, but the water comes through, and this valve will open and close to allow the water through and control that pressure of the water as it comes through. Typically, these have always been brass seats in here that the water flows over. It's made that way. It kind of wears out quickly. So they've developed these stainless seats. You imagine, 1,000, 1,200 gallons a minute getting through all these holes. But they do that. Engineers design these to handle that flow and not create cavitation or imploding bubbles in the water system, which shortens the life of these valves.
What kind of frequency is that opening and shutting at?
It typically won't shut unless there's absolutely no flow through the system. Most of these valves will have some flow at all times, and they'll only open all the way up if we have a fire flow.
So to help you understand, you're seeing a cross section. So the water's coming in one way. It's coming in at, say, 150 psi, pounds per square inch, and it's coming out at, say, 50 through that little device right there. So it takes all that pressure and takes the energy out of it and reduces it down to 50. Okay? And this device is about this big around. Okay?
And that's done to maintain a usable pressure at the home. Some homes are supplied with 100 pounds plus, but if we did not have these valves throughout the system, we would have 200 plus PSI at homes, and it's hard on not only our infrastructure, but can be very hard on dishwashers, washing machines, things with plastic fittings. Typically are recommended to have 80 PSI.
It might help. Those pressure regulating valves are often situated right where those zones break. So if you remember this map, we color coded this map. So when Ryan's talking about 100 or 120 PSI coming in the upstream side of the valve, we break it down to like 50 PSI. And so then it'll start to gain pressure again as the elevation drops down the hill. So that's what creates these zones. It's part of, in combination with the tank, that's how we break up the water zones.
That's good right there. Perfect. So once we get through the valves, breaking down the pressure to a usable pressure, we're into our main lines, our distribution system. Matt and his guys do a great job of getting that water distributed throughout Provo City. So if you can imagine, on this side of the display, we've got a 10-inch water main. From there, we feed in through a copper service line, typically 3/4 or 1-inch service line, into our meter. Sorry, Dave. So in this meter, we've got our new AMI meters. Matt could probably speak to this a whole lot better than I can, but these AMI meters allow us to read the water usage year-round. No longer do we not read during the winter months due to snow, things like that. We can actually get that meter information year-round.
How are they read?
Through a radio. Shane, do you want to maybe tell a little bit about how the read comes through?
Are they throughout the city now? Are we?
We have what, six antennas?
Yeah.
We have six collectors throughout the city, and each of the meters picks an antenna and broadcasts daily its read to that antenna collector.
So what you're seeing on here was installed after the fact, but this is an antenna. Okay? And these towers can radio down and hit that. And the question was, how much snow can we get through? Okay, most of these are in the front yard. And talking with Matt, this last winter with all that snow, we did not have any problems getting through snow. If a car parks on top of it, yes. Okay. The neat thing about this AMI, and we just talked about it briefly, is we can read those meters, but we can find out if there's a leak. If that meter is constantly going, we can program the AMI readout so we can detect a leak going through a meter. Meaning the water's going through the system, and somewhere between the meter and the house, there's a leak. And then we can then notify the homeowner of that leak. The other thing that is very important for our system, and that is we can detect backflow coming through here. Okay, so contamination. Somebody's not done something right in their house, something getting back into our system. We can detect that, and we can get that warning. Those are probably two of the most important things about this AMI. We can get those reports, and then we can go find out what the problem is and get it rectified. Okay.
How does it detect contamination?
It detects backflow. Backflow, which is the potential for contamination.
Right.
Okay. It doesn't.
I've been wondering how.
Let's clarify that. Yeah. It just detects water going backwards, not forward. Okay.
Where are we at on the rollout of these new AMIs?
We have approximately 19,000 connections throughout the city. We're somewhere around 15,000 right now. We're going to install at least 1,000 this summer. We have basically 3 years is our scheduled time for all those to be all the way through them.
As you think about this meter sitting in a meter can in your front yard, not only is it in the ground, but there are connection points. There's a lot that goes into having a crew come out and change these out. It's not just a simple plug and play. So it is somewhat involved to get into these meters and have a guy laying on the ground reaching down into a meter vault to change these out. And then there's probably a little bit of work on the back end getting all the communications through. As Gary mentioned, oh, sorry.
Just interesting to note that 19,000 connections when I think we have 34,000 electrical connections or something like that. So that the difference would be what your apartments and places that have one water connection and multiple electric.
Yeah, if you think about, if you've ever looked at an apartment complex, every apartment by itself, each unit will have its own meter. So there'll be like a dozen or several dozen electric meters on the side of an apartment. That apartment complex will probably have 1, maybe 2 water meters. And they'll be, 4-inch meters. They'll be big meters, but we'll only have 1 supply into that. That's the difference.
Gary mentioned backflow. This is a dual check. Plumbing code requires these on the service connection now, but they haven't always. So we've got quite a few homes in Provo that do not have this. The big,
Girl at 75 would have it.
most likely not. Yeah.
Is that the city's responsibility or the homeowner's responsibility?
So the meter is the city's responsibility. The meter set, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be the homeowner's responsibility. The meter set is ours as well.
Responsible all the way to the last connection at the bottom of the meter box, then it goes out to the home. So everything in that meter box belongs to the city.
But we haven't made a concerted effort to change those meter yokes out so that everybody has a dual check. We're just changing them out as they need to be changed or development occurs.
New construction would require them, but old ones are grandfathered in. The important part about this dual check is we're tasked with keeping our water system safe and clean. And one thing that we try to protect against is backflow, back siphonage. Say we have a fire hydrant out in the street going full force. If that lowers the pressure to a certain point, then you could start siphoning water from the home. If they've got a hose laying out in their bathtub, their bird pond, whatever, that could siphon that water back into our system. So this is a really good protection against that happening.
But you don't have that in all the homes.
We do not have that on all the homes.
I will say, like Stadium Avenue that we're doing, Stadium Avenue, as we're going up Stadium Avenue, we are redoing all of the services and upgrading these. Okay, so as we're fixing some of these problems, we're going all the way up to the meters. Okay.
One problem with this, this dual check, your water heater in your home, when that water heats up, it causes expansion. So if you have this, it's not going to allow any water back into the system anymore. That hot water heater comes on, heats up that water, the water expands. You need somewhere for that expansion to go. That's where these come into play. Also in plumbing code, hot water expansion tanks. A lot of homes don't have these. As Gary mentioned with Stadium Avenue, we are going in and determining which homes that we are installing these dual checks on don't have these, and we're making arrangements to get expansion tanks installed in those homes.
It's a recommendation to put that in. Okay, it's not required, is that correct?
Right. It can cause a rupture of your water heater if it's not installed.
Does code require when the water heater's changed?
I believe any, right. It's one of those things, if you go in yourself and change out your hot water heater, chances of you doing this, it's probably not gonna happen.
If you hire a plumber.
If you hire a plumber, then they're gonna do it and charge you $50 to throw that in there. All right, so after it comes through the meter, comes through the double check, it's gonna come into your home. A lot of the older homes have got an old wheel gate valve. It's probably got some corrosion on it. Might be hard to turn, probably won't turn all the way off. Newer homes, they typically install ball valves. If you have an emergency in your home, you have a toilet line break, something happened, that's your quickest, best way to shut down the water. Keep any flooding from happening. Typically directly above the shutoff valve, you've got a PRV. Similar to the PRVs we use, a lot smaller scale, a lot cheaper, but this will regulate the pressure coming into your home. Also in plumbing code, they're required. Any home that has a water service of 80 PSI or greater. So we get a lot of calls. We don't have any water pressure at our home. We'll go out there and help them determine, I'd say 99 times out of 100 on the low water pressure calls, the pressure regulator's gone bad. They typically will last 10 years, but we've seen some that are only a year or two old. They've got a rubber diaphragm in them, similar to the diaphragm in this, that helps to control that water pressure as it goes through. And they do wear out over time.
When they wear out, do they usually break and cause problems?
So what typically happens, they'll get a hole in that rubber, and what will happen is it will only allow water to pass through that tear or hole in the diaphragm. So if the water sits overnight, you'll get up in the morning, you'll turn on your faucet, you'll get a spurt of pressure because it's allowing that pressure to build. Even though it's at a very slow rate, that pressure will build. And then once that pressure leaves, it actually goes down to almost nothing. So our calls that come in are saying, hey, we don't have any water pressure. Well, you've got a lot of water pressure. You don't have any flow because it's not making its way through this regulator valve. These are adjustable. They come factory set at 50 pounds. If anybody has low water pressure at home and they want to increase that a little bit, loosen that lock nut, tighten that screw in clockwise, and that will increase the water pressure to your home.
Question, just be careful.
Yeah, you can bypass it. If you turn it all the way in, it'll bypass the unit and you'll have full line pressure in your home.
I've been in my home 40 years now, and I've never had it fixed. I've been gone a few years on missions and stuff. Is that possible?
It is possible. In fact, we had a call the other day. One of my guys went out on, and he knew it was a regulator valve, but it looked nothing like this. It was an old style. He said it looked like a bell, like a a bell ringer's bell. It was just such an odd shape, but that's exactly what it was.
It just might be a turnoff valve.
Yeah, you may not have one
I know
installed.
where the turnoff valve is. I've never seen this thing.
Yeah.
Probably don't have it.
You may not, especially if the home was built 40 years ago. Most likely you don't. Dave.
So I do repairs on the churches, and you'll go in and they have often gauges showing the pressure going in and then into the system. And it could be 150 going into the building. We often have a BRB. And then when you walk in, you go, whoops, it's the same on both sides. And like you say, sometimes you'll turn on that water and it'll go down, then it'll build back up. And the time that it's sitting there, putting pressure on all your pipes, your fittings, your seals, and it's at 150 PSI, typically shortens the life of everything in the system.
It does. And on that point, it's good to note that if it goes all the way up immediately, most likely you've got a regulator valve issue. If it stays at a setting, say you have 150 on the supply side, inside your building you have a regulator that's set to say 75, but it builds up over the week or something when no one's using the water. You use that water and it goes back to that setting of 75. Most likely you're getting thermal expansion. The thermal expansion will build up that pressure in the system inside the home or the church. Church is a great example because a lot of times the water inside isn't being used maybe a couple days a week. So it has time for that pressure to build up. So that's where these would come into play. Give somewhere for that pressure to go so it's not building up inside the building.
Right, the times we'd seen it fail, you get the pressure down and within 5 minutes it was back up. Could you just go watch that needle?
Then most likely you've got a regulator valve that's needing to be replaced.
Brian, so where does the sprinkling system enter into this?
So
And
the
how does it come into play as far as backflow? and
Absolutely.
pressure and everything?
Sprinkling system is going to be tied off after the meter, but before it gets into your home. So typically they'll be fairly close to the water meter. We do not allow them inside the meter can. It's got to be outside of the meter can, but it'll be installed on the service line between the meter and the home. And that's connected in with a stop and waste valve. Stop and waste valve, you're able to turn that valve off and it has a drain port on it. It will release the water out of that system into the ground. And we do require backflow devices on sprinkling systems. A lot of people are using chemical fertilization, things like that hook up to the sprinkler system. We're setting ourselves up if we don't have a backflow device and someone has chemicals tied into the sprinkler system. If we have a main line break, a large fire using lots of water, it can suck those chemicals back into our water system.
And that's the apparatus you see now that's got to have that
Right.
loop.
Typically, an RP is an above ground approved device, and it will not allow any of that water to backflow into the city system.
There's above ground and below ground too. So,
Another question. Our neighbor's sprinkler system broke and was really flowing. They called the fire department who couldn't help at all. The public works who came, where did they turn it off? Because can it be turned off in the box itself?
So the only people that are allowed to operate this valve on the meter are Matt and his guys. Now we find a lot of plumbers that will do that. Some homeowners will do that. You could turn this off. It's not going to do anything for the sprinkler system because it's tied on out here. The stop and waste valve, typically that's the best place to shut off the sprinkler system.
So that's the same value you would use in the winter to shut it off?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And that's typically the first valve on the system right next to the supply.
what a cheater. Cliff brought up a cheater.
A cheater, yeah. So we don't like cheaters. Matt goes around to all the contractors. I shouldn't say all the contractors.
Do you guys know what a cheater is? This is where we bypass. This is where we bypass the truck.
So a lot of times during new home construction is where we typically will find this. A meter has not been set, yet the contractor or landscaper, whoever it may be, wants water to do something inside the home. So what they'll do, it's fairly simple to do. They'll get 2 fittings and a small piece of pipe put in here. They can turn this valve on, and all of a sudden they have water. Sometimes they can just screw a faucet into that and turn that on, and they've got water. Well, first of all, they're stealing. They're taking water. Most times it's a small amount, but every drop counts, right? That's what we're preaching. So when Matt finds these, he'll come and turn this off, and you can actually put a lock in here and lock those out. But yeah, we don't like to see the cheaters.
So, I know this, but just for information. What do you suggest contractors do now?
Matt, do we allow temporary meters?
We don't have temporary meters. We used to, we tried that, it didn't work out very well. So we ask whoever's building the home, whoever's going to occupy the home to sign up for service. We'll install a meter, then they can use all the water they want. And it's been working pretty well that way.
Okay, any more questions? So I don't know about you, but if you've ever pulled off this lid, my meter does not look this clean. There's nothing but spiders and leaves and rotten stuff, debris down there. And but anyhow, so thanks, Ryan.
Yeah,
So,
you're welcome.
thanks, guys. I'm going to ask Ryan to stick around in case we need any more questions. I'm going to ask a question. Do you guys know what the pressure is, the water pressure at your house? Do you have any idea?
Inside or outside?
Inside.
55.
55? Do you know that for a fact, or are you just guessing? Okay, anybody else?
No idea.
No idea. From prior discussions, do you remember what our state regulations are on what we need, what we're aiming for as engineers, as Public Works Department?
Well, there's,
They,
to me, there's a minimum, but and then there's a maximum, preferred maximum. So there's a range, right?
there is. And if I can, everybody's, okay, this is state code. Now, Ryan, let me back up a question. Ryan, how many wells do you have running right today?
4 wells
We have
today.
4 wells running. 2 weeks ago, we had no wells running. So where was all our water coming from? Springs. Okay? And so when we have a subdivision come in, one of the things that we are doing, according to state code now, we need to take that new subdivision and do a model. We need to put it into a computer program to verify that we can supply water to that subdivision and to those homes. On July, let me start right down here. On July 4th, usually the busiest, hottest day, give or take. Hold on a second, you're gonna catch there. Bring it up for me. On July 4th, or during the month of July, when everybody's using their water, this is our minimum, 40 pounds. Okay, and if you drop below 50 down to 40, you usually can tell. Okay, but this is in July. Okay, 30. This is they call this 30 instantaneous demand. This is kind of a factor of safety. This is kind of the range. But if there's a fire, this is the lowest we can go down. Now we have a computer program we're going to show you in a little bit where we can actually, through the computer, say there's a fire at this location, and the computer, knowing the pressures throughout the system, it will tell us whether or not we can supply the water to that subdivision or to that development. Okay, what we are trying to do in Provo is a minimum of 50. These are state minimums, but we're trying to have this be our minimum. So this PRV that you have, that we saw right here, the 30 that we have throughout the town, the lowest pressure we have, Shane, is what, 50? Most of them are set at 60. Okay, as we go through those different pressure zones, because we have found that people complain if they get their water below 50. And so we are trying to maintain this, not this, as far as a standard, okay? Because when we get to this point, we usually get complaints.
So if a developer wants to develop, can he argue that state law is this level and you can't require anything more?
I believe we can, this is a minimum, we can have tighter restrictions if we want, okay? This here, we use in our standards as far as what we're aiming for, okay? But this is really a minimum. We don't really want to go here, because if we go here, people are going to complain, then we'll have to be updating the system.
Gary, if I can jump in one comment here. We talked with Brian, well, it wasn't with Brian, it was with Bob Trumbley from the legal office. There was some question about this, and there is a city ordinance that says that the water system proposed by a developer is subject to approval by Gary and by Dave Graves. It's not by name, it's city engineer, and it's the water distribution division director. So they do have allowance to go tighter than the state regulations.
Now there are, yes.
Maybe you're going to get to this, but as we start talking about pressure, volume has so much to do with pressure, doesn't it? As far as the volume that you have in a pipe, if we're starting to, if we don't have the volume and we take some of that for a fire, then automatically we don't have enough pressure then. Is that, are volume and pressure interrelated is what I'm asking, I guess.
Yes.
And volume will have to do with our infrastructure and what we have available. And yet pressure might be, is that, I guess they do go hand in hand.
You can have a 4-inch pipe, and we've talked a little bit about this. There are some places in the city that have, I don't know that we have 4-inch, but we do have 6-inch in a number of locations in streets. And you've got 100 PSI, it looks just fine on the fire hydrant, but as soon as you open that fire hydrant and you start taking water out, you have they call it head loss in the system, and that water starts rushing through the pipes, and the friction is reducing your pressure, and you're going to lose pressure someplace else up in your system. And so that's the model that Gary's talking about. We used to not have this model, but the fact that we can now do it on a computer, it's a significant step, and we'll show you a little bit about this.
Yeah, that's a great question, because you may have a subdivision right here, but you may end up having a problem not right around the subdivision. It may actually be a problem over here because of a smaller site. Okay, Dave, Torres?
I was gonna say, I have to give Rebecca credit for this. She gave me this example just yesterday, and it made a lot of sense to me. You can view your water lines similar to how you view your roads. You have your freeway, you have a dirt road, you have a 2-lane main road, and that can equate to the sizes of your pipes. And each one can handle, cars, and your freeway can handle a lot more cars. But say all of a sudden you have an accident or a fire, let's say on the freeway, what happens to the freeway? All those cars kind of block up, and so the water has to find an alternative route, and pretty soon those dirt roads just can't handle the volume of cars, and neither can the 2-lane highways. So that's what this model that we have helps us determine, what capacity our pipes have and what volume and where we can divert water through those various pipes. And the pipe size that you have has restrictions, obviously, and that's what this model helps us determine is how we can best service those areas. And if there are restrictions, what we can do to solve those, and okay, maybe this pipe here does not have adequate capacity, and so we need to look at ways of either adding another route through there, another pipe, or upsizing that pipe to get that the adequate flow through.
So when you sense, because of a fire or whatever, that there's a loss of pressure, can you introduce more pressure, more volume into the pump, into the system? Of course, you may not want to do that. If it's not a fire and it's a break, you're just aggravating a break.
The thing you got to remember is about our water system. It's huge. I mean, and it's a dynamic moving fluctuation. Your pressure of your house is not always 55. Okay, it's fluctuating based off of the demand, and some of that may be in the morning when everybody's up showering and everybody's sprinklers are going, okay? That pressure is dropping because of the demand. That's why Ryan, he's watching this, and that's when he kicks in the extra wells to meet that demand, and we're looking at the tanks level and all that. So everything is fluctuating, moving, okay? Now, here's another question. Is the water in the pipe always going the same direction?
I hope so.
No.
Not on the street, don't you ever done this?
It's pressure. It's pressure. So when that water goes in there, it might be going this way based off of demand. It might be going this way.
But not in the same pipe though.
Yeah,
is it? In
it's
the
not
same
like
pipe?
sewer. It's not gravity. It's pressure. It's pressure. So wherever the pressure is, it's going different directions. Okay, so based off that, for the most part, in Provo, we start on the foothills and it comes down. Okay, because gravity's, that's how. But pressure, the water is going both directions. Just so you know, because it's pressurized.
Interesting, the analogies there are perfect with electronics, where you can have electrical flows in both directions at the same time, and it just kind of seems weird that it happens.
And the amazing thing, if I can give we're talking miles, hundreds of miles of pipe, and Matt is responsible for making sure none of those pipes leak. Okay, and it's under pressure. I don't know about you guys, but I hate working under the sink because there's always that leak. But Matt's got hundreds of miles of this pipe that he's working with. Okay, let's have the next slide. We're running out of time, so I'm sorry.
So Kate, let's clarify. Kay's right. We're talking main lines out in the street. Once it hits your lateral that goes into your home, it's generally going towards your home.
I'm talking out.
And we don't want it to go backwards. That's the.
I'm sorry. Clarify that.
The main out in the street can go both directions.
There goes Greg Graves' recommendation. Okay. Okay, here's the state requirement stating that we need to have a model done. Okay, we have to do that. Let's have the next slide. Okay, here's our pressure zones, here's our wells, here's our booster pumps. This kind of shows you that water going down. And basically where these lines are where these PRVs are at. Okay. Okay, next slide. I'm trying to get out of here so we can be on time. Okay. Can we zoom in on this, Rebecca? Okay. If we could zoom in on this, we could see, you could see the pressures here, blue, red, hot. Okay. Usually, the pressure, you can hear again, you can see those pressure zones where we got PRVs that are stopping this water from going down. So depending on where you live, we can pretty much gauge where this is. What's interesting, and we were talking about this, you don't really want to live next door to a tank because the pressure is not always the best there. Does that make sense? You may have all this water. You may have 5 million gallons of water sitting next to you, but a lot of that water is based off of that gravity. Okay, here we have, what do we got here? Is this, what are we looking at? Is this the pipe there?
Right here.
Okay, so here's a blow up of those pressure zones. Here's the colors based off of it and how that pressure works. So what's interesting, where Rebecca's at right now, she's remotely tied into her computer at her desk, is we could have that subdivision come in. In fact, we got a phone call, Shane, did I pass that email on to you? Somebody had a question over on 9th East, 1300 South, a little subdivision. They called in and wanted to know what the pressures and if the model was required. I sent them to Shane, and Shane was able to, he can go there, say we got 4 homes, 5 homes, whatever, and we can put that into here and determine if we can supply water. And if we can't, we have to basically, make a negative recommendation. Okay. I would like to take the time to show you what we go through to model this, but it's a bunch of charts and graphs and stuff like that. And I don't know if you would understand it because I'm still trying to understand it. Okay, but it does show us whether or not the fire flows are there. Here again, Rebecca's showing us some of the PSI and how that changes as we go through the system. Okay, but the model allows us to kind of mess with things. We can go in and change a pipe diameter over here and see how it affects this house or this subdivision. Okay, to fix the problems. Okay, one of the things, just as a note, can we go to the pipe diameter? We do have 6-inch pipe in town. The new state code is 8. Okay, the older part of town has a lot of 6-inch pipe in it. We have very good connectivity between that, a redundant system, so we got water coming in from all directions. But our new subdivision, we're requiring 8-inch pipe to be in there. We find that that has we have a better flow, allowing us to meet those. Here again, you can see the pipe diameters that we have throughout town, okay? Here's, I believe this is University Avenue, correct? This model that we have already put into service the 2 tanks that we're working on currently, just as we're kind of moving forward in that direction. But basically, here's the railroad track, freeway. This is kind of where we're having some of our breaks in our tanks and our pressure lines. So, but here again, this model, we can go in here, and if we had time, we could just pick a pipe like right here and change that diameter and see how it affects the pressures and the flows in that surrounding area through this model. So this model, we're trying to do this not only with our water, but we're also now trying to do it with our sewer as well. Okay.
If I can jump in here, again, this piece of the puzzle for the water system, I cannot emphasize how important this is. This is one of the key pieces of software that we've added to the water. The other day, Rebecca, if you can go back over toward 500 West and the West Side Connector, I sat in this room. We had a couple of engineers here, and Rebecca had it up. We were kind of practicing with the model. And I asked Rebecca, I said, on 500 West, out by the West Side Connector, if by chance, and I'm not advocating anything, but if the West Side Planning Group said, hey, let's put a big box that's going to require 3,000 gallons a minute, tell me what our fire flow is currently with our existing system. And she could tell me with the model. No fire flow test required, because right now it's not highest demand. She can run it with our highest demand, simulating the July peak time demands with the model. And she can tell me, hey, we don't have 3,000 gallons a minute. And I sat and asked her, I said, okay, let's start changing pipes. And she could change the pipe on 500 West and on 600 West to 12-inch. And we ended up having to change the pipe that runs underneath the freeway by the mall. And we could tell exactly what we needed to do to the system to get 3,000 gallons a minute if a big box store went at that location. Can you imagine doing CIP projects? I mean, this is what's generating the CIP now, and we can say, what's the most cost-effective way to get fire flow to this location? And we can do all these what ifs, and we're just running it on the computer. And it is such a key piece of information. I cannot emphasize, and it's, you know, Liz Nesbitt started it. Rebecca came in just shortly after Liz started. We've got about 3 people that are key people that run this model. It is absolutely important. It's absolutely critical. And we're doing this now with wastewater. We're getting to the point where wastewater and stormwater can be modeled. Anyway, Mike.
Prior to this computer program, which is miraculous, I cannot imagine how many slide rules that would take.
If you understood the calculation just for a 2-pipe system, you have to solve it mathematically, you know, and it's 2 variables, 2 unknowns. If you have 3 pipes, you got 3 variables, 3 unknowns. So if you can go back to college algebra and remember that, that's really fun. Now we have like 1,000 pipes, 1,000 unknowns. You know, that's essentially what they used to have to do by hand.
Gary, so you might not want to pass this out because it says if the shut-off valve in your home is not ever working, you may be able to shut off your water by opening the city meter pit and closing the meter shut-off valve at the empty your meter.
Where are you reading from?
Permission.
In an emergency, in an emergency situation, we don't want anyone's home to flood.
Yeah.
But we don't like.
Was that what you
Yeah.
passed out? Okay.
Yeah, it's on the
Yeah,
flood.
that's for, you know, we are very protective of our water. I want you to know that. If there's an emergency, yes, we'll work with people, but for someone to put a cheater in and to contaminate, do we have that program, or do you want to, how much time do we have?
He's just talking about turning it off.
Oh,
You might want to just put in an emergency.
okay, that is good to know. Brother, Mr. Soy, how much time do we have? What's that? More to go? Oh, okay.
Can I ask, I have a question about the pressure then that we were experiencing a couple of years ago. And I guess a lot of it had to do with the homeowners not putting in the pressure regulators. that up in Oak Hills and Rock Canyon areas, we were really struggling with some pressures and having things broken off. And the city also has backup for pressure, don't they? A couple of, when it happened, Bart said, Mayor, do you remember this? Bart said there were 2 separate meters that went out at the same time, which is unheard of almost. He says, what a fluke. And it cost us, it cost some neighbors. Do you remember your shipping? What was that, Dave? Do you remember what that was?
So if you have a pressure regulator go bad, you can have it get stuck open occasionally. It doesn't necessarily have to go bad, but you can get a rock in that valve or something else that will actually hold that valve open. And so then you're delivering high pressure downstream in the main line, which reaches the homes. That backup system is inside that individual PRV that we're talking about. That's the backup for those homes. And if there's homes downstream that do not have that backup, that PRV, they can have 150 PSI and will start to blow fixtures, off of homes. And that's kind of what happened. In some cases, you'll have 2 valves in the same box. And if one goes bad, it'll bypass through the other one. And I think in the case that you're talking about, we had both valves stuck wide open or they went bad. And so we were
city valves.
Yes, in the main line, out in the street. And so we were delivering 150 plus PSI water downstream to homes. And it was getting into homes that did not have those individual PRVs. And that's when it was blowing, fixtures.
Where's the liability in that situation? Is it responsibility of the homeowners to have that functioning view?
It's a hard one. And, it's one of those that I think we work with Gary Millward and legal and try to figure out, hey, what's the right thing to do? We encourage, I think the best thing we do is encourage homeowners to get the PRVs in their homes. It's a good protection.
It wasn't required, then it's hard.
Right. It's very difficult, for, people, especially they go years and years and years without a problem. They go, well, why do I need this? And it's a pretty big fluke. It's a long shot to have multiple PRVs go out at the same time. But it does happen.
I remember it when it did happen, and it just that those people were quite upset. And Bart would go to the neighborhood meetings. Please put in your pressure reducers inside your own home. Please, 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 just for your own safety. And if they do any remodeling now, they would be required still, wouldn't they?
If they're remodeling plumbing, they would likely be required to upgrade to the new code. But if that doesn't always happen.
Where this blue PRV pressure reducing valve that we had right here, they're usually in a big concrete vault. Okay, what size was that?
That's a 4-inch.
That's a 4-inch. A lot of times they will have the bigger pressure reducing valve, then off to the side they'll have a bypass with a smaller pressure reducing valve, so that if the one goes out, we can still get water around through there with low flows. Okay, there is some redundancy that we build into these, but these valves here, that valve with all the plumbing that goes with it, that's a smaller one. But I recently installed one on an 18-inch line. It was over $100,000 just for a concrete vault, which just had plumbing in it like this. And so these valves, they're essential, but we always try to build in some type of redundancy in there to help them out as far as making sure that people that we provide water to them. Okay. Okay, so Shane, do we have that one slide? Can we? Okay. Let's, we got something kind of cool here to show you, because if you remember earlier I asked, what we're seeing here is, can we stop it or not? Okay. We're gonna do this a couple times. What we're doing here is to show you, we mentioned earlier about going from spring water to well water. Okay, we just made that transition here a couple weeks ago. What we've done here in this little analysis is to show you, if we turn on Canyon Road, the well there, how long it takes. About 3 days for that water from that well to go through the system, or to come from here all the way down to the west side. So to kind of give you an idea how long it takes water to move through our system.
This is the mod, this is again, the model telling us, this is something that Shane took off the model. So we can color code the water from different sources and we can tell where that source is going.
So the other cool thing about this, I don't want to put any alarms or flags up, but if there was a contamination at a spot, we could pretty well try to track which direction that's going as well. Okay, as far as that ability, you're just running that over and over again.
Yeah, I'm
But
kind of
this is
running
just
it
up
slow.
on Canyon Road right here, but you can just see how it takes a little while, and then it just takes about 3 days to get that water through that system.
So the color coding is just what percentage of the water came from the well and what comes from the springs?
That I believe is in the pressure zones. No,
Yes.
I'm not sure what, on this one here, the red color.
The color coding is the percentage of water that's hitting that particular part of the city from that source. So red is the greatest percentage, that's like 80%, and then it goes down from there. So this particular node that we're modeling is on Canyon Road, just north of the stadium. Most of the water that runs through this particular node is spring water. And so this is where the water, that spring water goes.
Yeah, I was trying to speed up because I was knowing we were behind schedule, but I'd like to bring up one more topic, if you don't mind. Can we go, Rebecca, back to the pressure zone? Part of the state code states very clearly that we are not to put a booster pump on our water main to provide water to a house. Okay? Now, there are homes in the city that have done this before the state code kicked in. Okay? And this is always a concern on the east side or when you're close, when you have those lower pressures. But every once in a while, we get that request coming in, can we put a booster pump? And I just want you to be aware, we tell people no when it comes to that, okay? Can we go, Rebecca, can you go to the one with the pressures as far as, and.
The model?
Yeah, the model, sorry. But this is a request that we have, and it's something that we don't want. I mean, the state doesn't allow it, and why? There is the potential for contamination, okay? But this is, at least that's my opinion as far as that goes. But usually up here on the east bench, we get that request. We do have a few homes that we're aware of that do have booster pumps, but there's not much we can do about that. But as far as new homes, we don't want that or allow that. Dave?
So there's property on the bench, like you say, and you go farther north to the mouth of Provo Canyon. How problematic are some of these higher level properties?
This is a problem that we're constantly facing. I mean, we just had a discussion this week with, 2 weeks ago we were here, we had that other development right at the mouth of the canyon. That is a concern that we have because the further you go up the mountain, the harder it is to provide not only their daily usage, but the fire flow. And so we have to build another tank higher to get to that, to be able to meet those demands, because we don't want to provide a pump down below, which has the potential to, not be able to supply the demand when it's needed. Okay, so this is a concern that we have regarding those issues.
That development would present some problems water pressure wise, of high like that.
Just shooting from the hip, I would say yes, unless we have to take a very close look at it, okay? When you get to the top of the hill, where are you gonna, like I said earlier, low pressure is right next to your tank. Even if they put a tank right up there, I'm gonna guess that resident would wanna have a booster pump to get pressure higher in his house, okay? And so we have to be careful, and that is the beauty of the model, that we can take that, like Dave said earlier, we can bring up a situation, and where are we at right here?
This is the North Intermediate Reservoir, and these lines, this 13 PSI, that's our line coming down from the canyon, and then it's pumped up at West Feet up to this reservoir here, And it also gravity flows from there down to the main gallery. So you can see right below the reservoir, you only have 4 PSI.
Okay,
But to clarify, that is not being served. There's no connections on that 4 PSI line. We're modeling that for downstream use, but there's no connections. That's why there's multiple lines on this road, so that the homes that are on Canyon are connected to that higher 70 PSI line.
That's why Gary's saying you wouldn't want to build right next to the tank because you only have 10 PSI.
so
This
is
Councilor Gary, because when we are considering development on the higher levels, that's an issue we can ask Public Works.
exactly. And you have the state code that I showed that. We didn't read through it, but the state code requires developments to have that model done to verify that we can provide flows for those homes. And then they have the state minimum standards. But me personally, after what Mr. Harney said, we're after 50, not 40. Okay, because I'm telling you, you get pressures below 40 and people start complaining. It's just, it takes forever for me to shower and my toilet to fill up, and it just takes, people notice it.
It's one thing inside your house, but if you're designing a sprinkler system, you have to design it with PSI. And if it's designed for 60, 70, 80, and you're running at 40, you won't get the coverage. It'll fall short. It just doesn't work.
People, yeah, and that's a great point, because they will have put, say, 10 sprinklers on one station, and really what they need is maybe 4. Okay, because of the amount of water that they have and the pressure. Okay, they got to get those sprinkler heads up. So there is domino effect as far as when that pressure goes down, as far as, and then they always want us, the city, to come back and fix the problem. And sometimes there is no real easy solution to the problem other than a bigger tank higher up the mountainside. And we know those are not cheap. So, okay, any more questions? By the way, if you go up Columbia Lane, you'll see we're about ready to close that wall up on Columbia Lane. So we're getting close to putting the final pour on the wall, and then shortly thereafter we'll be doing the top deck. So I mean that tank is coming along. I think Rebecca Shane, still July as far as time they get the scaffolding and everything still, but we're getting ready for that. So, okay, did I see one more hand? I'm sorry. Oh, Mayor?
Do I understand this is your last presentation?
Unless you have any more questions or information.
So a couple things. Thanks, team. I think you've been pretty thorough. We would love to hear from the council if we've missed anything. I think in leadership, it'd be good idea to talk about overall, is this a good approach? Would you like to do this with different departments? So any feedback that you have would help us help you in the future.
I mentioned in an email to the mayor the other day, even if we did just one session on wastewater and stormwater, I think it'd be really good for the council to hear a little bit about master plans in those other areas. We've talked about some wastewater issues, but it's been a long time since we've talked about any stormwater issues, and I made a recommendation to the mayor the other day that even just one session would be helpful.
I would hope that we would do that, because this has been the most informative thing I've ever had since I've been in city government, period. It's been extremely helpful and well done.
It's very well done.
You've got some great staff here, very good people.
So what kind of credit do we get? This is not apology 101.
Let's have a graduation ceremony. We'll print up some certificates.
So I'm going to ask you kind of a crazy question. Is that as we sit on the budget committee, we talk about, well, we got this much water and this is how much money we're getting. But there's so much involved in between this is how much water we have at the mouth of the canyon and in the tanks. And we talk about seepage, we talk about metering, we talk about so many different issues. Are we actually looking at, are we recognizing the water that we have, the water that we're receiving, and what kind of differences are there in the value of the water? Are we charging too much? Are we not charging enough? Are we losing money because of what we're doing? As I sit in the budget committee, those are the questions that I appreciate the system and what we're learning about the system. And when they start talking about dollars and cents, there's always the concern, well, are we charging enough?
Well, just from my experience, yes, there's been some rate increases. Are we behind schedule? Yes. But I think from my perspective, I think you have approached it correctly in that we are moving to fix problems. We're not, from the Public Works, we are not asking for a Cadillac, okay? We realize that we are working in that Chevy mode. I don't know if that's a good analogy anymore, but we are trying to be as conservative as we can to fix the problems that we have. Believe me, you could double water rates, and I'll guarantee you, I could spend the money, okay? But I believe, from my perspective, you've approached it in a very conservative but checked way as far as what we are doing. We have, with the CIP, there are some projects out there that need to be done. Would I like to have it done faster? Yes. But you have a council, in my opinion, have approached it correctly. But there has been, in my opinion, also a neglect of the system as far as keeping it updated. Okay. And you've changed that approach and you're moving in the right direction.
So I guess the question that I'm asking now is the CIP, does it reflect the greatest problems that you see? In my mind, that's what I'm wondering. Are we adjusting the right? Are we spending the money in the right place? That's what I'm supposed to ask as a budget.
That is a very good question, because yes, we have the CIP, but the problem you have is Provo City is still growing. So as we're trying to fix the CIP problem, we have another development that comes in, or the BRT, for example. All of a sudden, the BRT, they got University Parkway opened up, and this is the time for us to fix a problem that's been there forever. So now I'm kind of taking, my wish is to take that money from the CIP to fix this problem here. There'll always be those problems, and that's the beauty, is that Provo is growing, okay? And so as it's growing, we're trying to fix problems that have been there for a long time, but also fix the problems related to the growth. Trying to get the water down here to this area or to upgrade the existing lines.
So I guess, like I said, in your opinion, do we have a leakage problem? Is that a big problem? And if it is it a metering problem? And I know we're working on the AMI meters. What is it? Are we addressing your greatest concerns?
Yes, you are. You're working in the right direction. Yes. And it's going to take time. We have we have very talented staff, but we can only do so much as far as if you're to double our income or, our CIP, we're going to have to be putting on a lot of projects. So with what you're giving us, yes, we are fixing the problems and moving forward. Okay. So now Dave Decker may disagree with me.
Okay, I was gonna give one partial. I apologize, Mayor. One of the questions that came up in the list of questions from the Finance Committee was this idea of, they call it a water loss or water audit. We talked about it, a couple of presentations ago, and it was addressed in the master plan. Bowen and Collins, our consultant, looked at water loss over the previous 10 years, so from 2000 to 2010. And we were averaging about 14 or 15% water loss. So our production meters from our wells, our springs, were showing a certain amount of gallons, and we were only delivering about 85% of that to our customers. We were billing about 85, 86% of that. So we were averaging about 14% loss in the master plan. And if you remember, there was a couple of reasons that they were saying in the master plan that might happen, but we haven't lost that as far as the vision, the perspective that needs to be done in the future. But once our AMI, those 4,000 AMI meters are installed, we're going to get a lot more accurate readings. We're using still 4,000 old meters, and so meter accuracy is one of the issues that we still have to look at. But I also look at it and say, are we within a reasonable amount compared to other water systems? And if 14, 15% is kind of a moderate score, you can get water systems nationwide that are in 20, 25% water loss. And I certainly don't want to go there, but the industry is basically saying, if you're under 10% on your water loss, you got a pretty good system there. It's pretty common to have some water loss, and if it's under 10%, you're doing pretty well. You have to remember, we also have some losses that we know about that are accounted for that. So when we have a water line break, it goes unmetered and it's going out the system. It goes unmetered to our customers, but our production meters are reading that. Every time we have a fire flow test from our fire department, same situation. We're losing water that we know we're losing, but not accounting for. During the winter time, our springs will sometimes produce more water than our consumption is. We intentionally drop water back into the Provo River. Again, we know about it, but all of that is water that is part of that water loss. So to look at a 14% average, it's okay. It's, you know, it's not a great score. I think we can do some, you know, some other things. There's certainly some pipes. The 48-inch that we've talked about on Canyon Road, it's one of the oldest pipes in the system. It's one that we probably need a serious review on when it comes to a water audit in the future. I apologize.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Calder and Mr. Decker. That's been a
Thanks for having us.
thorough presentation, set of presentations.
I hope you have learned something and we haven't confused, because sometimes we try to keep it so that you'd understand. So I hope it's been a good experience for you.
Yes, thank you.
May I also point out that this team, and I tease Jimmy a lot because he's kind of the face of a lot of this, but this team's been very frank and forthright in bringing to the council things that other people have not been willing to bring to the council. And it's been hard. It's hard for you because we're giving you hard decisions, but it's the start of it is they're acknowledging that, wow, it's been too long and we've overlooked these problems. And it's not easy for them to bring it forward. So I'd like to publicly thank them for identifying these, bringing these hard decisions to you, and then thank you for responding well to them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Looks like Public Works is up again on our next item here. Discussion of sanitation.
So just say it, Mayor, if we don't invite Jimmy, we don't need to spend money.
Jimmy's the problem.
Okay.
He's okay as long as he doesn't have a thumb drive with a spreadsheet on it.
Guess what I brought for you.
Bryce has got the thumb drive. While we're loading that, I do want to reiterate the mayor's feelings about the support of the council. I do appreciate the great support that we've received from both the administration and the council. We've had a number of tough years, tough discussions that we've gone through. So while we're bringing this up, this is just a summary of a presentation that we did 2 weeks ago regarding sanitation rate increases. The 5-year plan that was presented some time ago, we had not done a sanitation rate increase or planned one until this coming fiscal year 18. And you may recall that it was thinking about it, Bryce, and then there we go. You may recall that we did 4 different options. Let's go back here. 4 different options in the last presentation. We talked about our current rate structure with the blue can, black can, and the green can, and 4 different options. During the presentation, Mr. Harding had talked about one of the options, and he was good enough to send an email with some details. And so we've added a 5th option. If I need to slide this back so that people can see that, a 5th option that was, I think we've tried to get as much information there from your email and make sure that we've represented correctly. So very, very quickly, I want to just go back through and again, looking for some guidance from the council today for how we want to do a rate increase. So the first option, I went to Jimmy and basically said, if we just add 10%, and that's the rate increase, we're looking for about a 10% increase on top of the current prices. That's represented in column 1. Column 2, we kept the same price for the blue can and the green can. You can see under the current and option 2, we maintain those. So the black can takes a little bit more of the increase in option 2, and basically supplements the green can or the blue can. And we maintain our current $2 discount. You can see over there currently, if someone takes a blue can or a green can, they get the $2 discount. We maintain that in option 2. Option 3, we did a little less on the black can, but we also reduced the discount to $1, maintain the blue can and the black can price. Option 4 is similar to a Salt Lake City model, where we really are encouraging residents. In fact, they're paying for all 3 cans, and it's just one price for all 3 cans. Residents don't necessarily have to have all 3 cans, but it doesn't change the price for all 3 cans. And then, and I'm going to try to summarize this, Mr. Harding. If I'm off, please jump in here. But one of the things that came out in the presentation last or 2 weeks ago, we showed a price per can for a blue can and green can. So we took all of our costs for recycling and then divided it by the number of cans that we had we have out in the system. And so we showed a price per blue can.
Do you remember what that number was?
Jimmy, do we have this? Do we have that in this presentation, or?
Oh, we have the other one right here.
Why don't you pull it up?
That's this one.
So here's the green can calculation and all of our costs. This is the price per can right there. And then the recycling, or this is green waste. Let's go to recycling. Same type of a scenario, price per can was $6.78. And the black can, we have the black can also on there. And so one of the things that we talked about, if you remember, one of the things we talked about was there's sometimes a question about, well, if the black can's that inexpensive, why are we charging $16 or $14? And part of it is the supplement to the blue can and the green can, but it's also a bunch of other services. And you remember one of the last slides, yep, Jimmy brought it up right there. We talked about several other things that go on, and sanitation basically has to cover the expense of those other activities, and that's coming out of the black can, essentially, is what it's doing. So that's what's driving the black can price higher. But let's go back to so what I'm thinking drove this conversation, or this idea, was part of that information was that the blue can is a little bit less money than the green can. And so kind of reversing what we're doing over here existing, where the blue can's $1 more than the green can, because that's not where the costs are. It's just the opposite way around. So I think that's partially what drove that recommendation right here. Again, not necessarily covering the entire cost for those. We're still looking to the black can to cover the entire cost, but kind of more representative of our actual cost. And then if someone gets all 3 cans, the recommendation was to give a $1 discount. So if you add up these these 3 numbers, it's $24.75, and we give a $1 discount on all 3 cans. And we did look at this recommendation from a broad perspective of sanitation, looking at the revenue to make sure that it would cover it, and we are satisfied that in Public Works that would be a reasonable option to consider. So essentially at this point, would like.
So $1 discount, I understand the logic, and I appreciate all the work that Dave, wasn't this your idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's developed over years, discussions with lots of people. I can't take credit or blame for all of it. But yeah, I proposed it most
Okay.
recently.
So the dollar discount, anytime you offer an incentive, it's because you want to encourage a certain outcome. And do we want to encourage people? Is that the purpose here of getting all 3 cans?
Well, I think that was partially our thinking behind this option 4, was to try to, we had heard that from some of the council members in our composting discussion about a year ago. We had heard, an idea of trying to encourage blue can, green can use, and trying to come up with some options to encourage that kind of thinking. I do have to, one other component, remind you, on option 4 and option 5 both, we approached Karen Larson in customer service, who does our billing for utilities. And she indicated with both of these options, and I had represented this before on option 4, it would take some time to get the billing to that point. Same thing with option 5, because it changes the structure of our billing pretty significantly. It's probably going to be January 1st before we can get there. And so we had talked about, do we do an interim option, one of these other options, moving to either the Salt Lake or the option 5 model?
Could I just say a couple things about option 5? First, I didn't realize that it would take the additional. I was hoping that maybe option 5 would be a good interim step. But the other thing, I mean, if you compare option 5 and option 2, some things don't look very different. Some things look quite a bit different. For example, the blue can looks like it's $2 cheaper. But and I think I had this in the email that I sent out, if you did a black and blue can together, the annual cost is the same because of that $2 discount. Now, if you did a black and a green together, you would pay $2 more per year. Sorry, 2 times 9 and all that stuff. You would pay more with option 5, and that's I would say that's the biggest thing I was trying to address in option 5. Is it seemed like option 2 had some quirks to it, where you add the green can, it's only adding an additional $18.75 a year to have this green can 9 months out of the year, whereas it was 40 something to add the blue can. And same thing happened if you had 2 cans and you added the other color. There were just some oddities, and it wasn't reflected in the cost of the service. Cost to the city to provide that service was not being reflected in those oddities. So to me, option 5 just makes things simpler and more just logical. What people would expect is how I saw option 5. So thank you.
Proposing that if we pick option 5, that the utility bill actually says Dave Harding option. Let me just share a thought or two, if I might. I don't remember, but I think I was one that actually asked when this was originally presented to me for option 1. And if your ultimate goal is option 4, and we're looking for an option in between now and then, I'd like to lobby a little bit for option 1 because of the simplicity of explanation. That was my worry, is if this is a 6-month thing, you can see the conversations down in customer service, trying to explain this and how the rates move from this to this. And so I liked option 1 for that reason, but only if option 4 is your eventual outcome. If it's not your eventual outcome, I don't think it matters, because then you'll go through this only one time of explaining this. And I think beyond that, I'll put me in a broad sense of the administration doesn't have a preference, only that we make the adjustment on time to get the needed revenue.
As I've studied this, I haven't done near the depth of study that you did, Dave. I'm having a hard time using the black can to subsidize the other cans. If it costs us $6.78 for a blue container, if it costs us $7.72 for a green container, I think in keeping with fees and services, I think that should reflect their cost. Now, we're trying to encourage people to use the blue can for recyclables. But then on the other hand, the recycling program isn't working that well beyond our city. I mean, 40% is going back to landfill. Another percentage is in a field somewhere in bales waiting to be shipped somewhere. I just think it's a false. I mean, if people want to recycle, I think they should pay for the recycling is and do it and not punish the people who choose not to. And that's why I really don't like option 4, because everybody has to have 3 cans whether they want it or not. And I just, same with our green containers. If our composting program isn't working, why are we encouraging people to do it? I'm just struggling with that.
Mr. Tackett, is that skin for a while, then I'll give Mr. Ernst.
Sorry, I appreciate it. In there, 2 things come to mind. In the fee discussions we've had previously, this question of coming up with, are we covering our full costs? And as you recognize, the price was what, $7.72 for one of them? Theory on setting fees would at least have you recognize when you're subsidizing a rate to accomplish some end. Now we have in chapter 13 of our general plan to this direction, just to basically study a sliding scale solid waste collection fee based on container size that encourages recycling and reduces the amount of waste that is landfilled. This appears to be trying to do that. We can recognize from these rates what the subsidy would be. So I think in what we've asked and what's good theory, most of these accomplish that. And my recommendation is that absolute indifference on those options. But I just wanted to put it out there that this is at doing what we have asked in the general plan to be done.
Just a quick question. Mr. Van Buren mentioned that our composting program isn't working or it's failing. I was curious.
As I understood our discussion last time, what was the $250,000 that something lost related to the composting last year? What, can you help me understand that thing? That $250,000 was mentioned.
That was the cost. Costing the city.
Yeah, so you're talking about on the other presentation that we had up, said we had the list of all the other services that we're covering. And there's $250,000 on the composting operation that we cover. We have the rooftop fee that we charge since the inception of the green waste when this solid waste district began it. It's $1 per household per month, which equates to about $250,000. That, in essence, covers the cost of that additional operation in addition to what people pay for their can.
If we didn't have composting, we would save $250,000.
Go ahead.
So when we calculated out our costs, the costs that we just showed on the screen, we don't have any tipping fees for green waste because those tipping fees, the green waste tipping fees, are included in that rooftop fee, right? So the rooftop fee is paying for all the tipping fees for green waste through the compost. So if we didn't have the rooftop fee, then there would be an extra $250,000.
So the rooftop fee is, explain that again.
The rooftop fee is a fee that we charge each, is it single house?
$1 per month.
$1 per month.
So the general citizenry is already subsidizing composting $250,000.
Right. That's true. And that was a fee that was going to the district, now is no longer directly going to the district. It stays in the city too, since we pay the bills for it. So it was because we're doing our own composting.
So I think what Bryce is saying is if we didn't have the composting program and the green can pickup, those green cans would effectively end up being taken to the land or to the transfer station in Springville and would be paying $36 per ton. And our tipping fee would increase, and you'd see it you know, if we had just eliminated the green can and said, fine, we'll go to black cans only, you just see an increase in the tonnage that would be charged from the landfill.
So we're really not costing us $250,000. It might be saving us some money.
It's basically a wash, if you want to look at it.
The other thing is if we did away with the green can, if we did away with the composting, then the argument for having the rooftop fee goes away because it was sold to the residents years ago as a composting fee. So if we don't have that, then we don't have a purpose for having the rooftop fee either.
But our tipping fees go up $250,000.
But our tipping fees would go up $250,000, and our income might go down by $250,000 depending on the decision of the council of whether we wanted to keep it.
So I always thought the green can kind of was a break even, considering we're saving composting, we're saving tipping fees, but we're paying for composting.
That's our hope. When we took it over a year ago, we were going to run it for about a year. I wouldn't call it quite breaking even right now because we're charging quite a bit less. Remember, we set the rates for, and we went through this 2 weeks ago. We set the rates. I think it's $2 a ton for pickup on the compost, which is extremely low. When the district was doing it, they were charging $20, and so we're, you know, this whole conversation that we had is about we're trying to avoid transporting that to the landfill because they're going to start to charge us now. So we're trying to get our composting operation into the point where we're going to break even on it, and it's basically we can say, hey, this is a wash.
It's not costing us $250,000.
No, if you said again, if you look at it and say, hey, if we eliminate the green can right now, that garbage is going to go someplace. And it's going to go to the transfer station, and we're going to pay $36 a ton for it at the transfer station.
Number two, composting also allows people that have a lot of extra stuff in their pickup bay to do. That's a popular program.
And again, you have to balance that out and say, is that a service that we want to continue to offer to the residents? Is it a value that they like?
And my argument wasn't to do away with the compost program. My argument was to charge a little more for the green can.
They would do better than break even even.
Well, unless $1 less people do it. I mean, that's that balance. I don't think $1 make it. Or do we charge?
I'm okay with charging
$2 more for someone that goes and gets a load of compost instead of doing it all on the black can? Is there a way we can?
I can support
green can.
I just think the green can program is good enough that we should maintain it.
And we alluded to some of that last week. We talked about, do we raise some of those prices? You need to keep in mind, and I apologize, you need to keep in mind this $1 rooftop fee that Bryce and Jimmy are talking about, that is not included in this and any of this right here. So that $1 rooftop fee shows up as a separate line on utility bills. It's just $1. So that's not included in any of these prices. So in your mind, if you want to look at it and say, well, we're really charging $5.75 for composting, you know, under this option, that's another way to look at it. If you want to look at it.
But you need to look at it on the black can, not on the green can. Or everybody's doing it. So it's really $17.25. Or it's
you can look at it that way. Yes.
You can.
Or for the green container, it's $5.75 if you have a green container and $1 if you don't have a container.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to look at it.
So last year you sold all of your product?
Yes.
And so you, in theory, could raise it till you start having some left over.
And I think Bryce is probably best suited to talk about this, but we had talked about, do we do small increases? We even talked about this last year when we took it over, and we intentionally set these prices low with the idea is we need to get this out of here. We need to make sure that we're selling it. Well, we're doing that. It's moving along, and we're not hauling any of it to the landfill. Even after it's shipped, nothing's going to the landfill at this point. So do we say, well, is it time to raise that price a little bit?
The composting facility is still at this point in time very much a test, if I want to use that term. We're passing, you know, we take a little step, make sure that we're good with that, make sure that our numbers are right, take the next step. I don't want to go and jump too far into that and fail. And that's been the way that we've taken this compost ever since we took it over is very much a, okay, they said they lost $700,000, is that correct, something like that? So we're taking it over saying, okay, we're not gonna lose $700,000. How do we not lose $700,000? Give ourselves a little budget, meet some production goals, meet some finance goals, take the next step until we feel that we're comfortable. And that's the only way I feel comfortable running it, is allowing ourselves to make little steps so that we don't embed ourselves into a $700,000 loss.
Increasing it by $1 be too much?
I don't think that there's a problem with increasing it a little bit. I know my operator up there that's running right now would love to have it increased. He talks to me about it all the time. At the same time, we're selling out right now. We are officially out of compost for the next, probably the next month as of right now. But I don't want to jump too far and lose sight of that goal of getting rid of the product. If we're talking $1 or $2, I think we're okay with it.
So how do we get a $1 increase?
Are you talking about the can or the load of compost?
The load of compost. Go from $2 to $3.
So I think the best time, and John, you correct me if I'm mistaken, when we, as part of the budget process, we adjust the consolidated fee schedule, that would be probably the best time to adjust composting.
Yep. Can I make a motion that we increase it $1? Will that do it?
We're happy to submit it with the consolidated fee schedule adjustments.
I think if we know the council, that's the wish of the council, we'll make the change.
So I think we have a motion. Make a motion to increase the pick up compost to $3 to $2. Is there a second to that motion?
Sorry, I just wanted to mention, we have two fees. We have one for residents, that's $2, and one for non-residents, that's $5.
3 and 6.
Talking to Sweetwood.
So we have an amended motion to increase the respective fees from 2 and 5 to 3 and 6. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Connect. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I have a broader comment, but I'll keep it to the motion. I'm generally supportive of this. My only fear is that we look at it from the broad picture, and rather than like make a bunch of independent small changes, that we just kind of take a step back and have a cohesive strategy across all of it. That would be my only, and in the end, I probably would support this. I think this is a smart thing. I just want to make sure that we're considering all the other changes together with this, and vice versa, that we consider this when we're considering other changes.
A thought is the council usually gives us some leeway in changing fees and then coming later on and having you ratify it. So we could say to Bryce, go ahead and go to 3 and 6. Before we change it on the consolidated fee schedule, we want to see the impact of that to make sure you're getting rid of the product. And if you come back in the fall and say, we still sold it all, then we could make the change on the fee. And as long as the council has this understanding that we can move a fee from time to time without a council action and then come and have you ratify it, I think that'd be a comfortable approach for us.
That's the purpose of my motion, because I would want to be sure we're getting rid of it. If to come by this fall, we're not getting rid of it, then we want to revisit the issue.
If that's the case, I would just say, let us administratively change it from 3 to 6 and then come back and report in the fall and see if we want to change it.
I didn't know if you needed a motion or not.
Well, as long as the council's comfortable with us, and we've kind of had this understanding, but the council's changed over time, that we can move fees and then come and ratify it at a later time with you if we're trying to be responsive to the marketplace, rather than
give you that comfort.
I think based on this conversation, we'd have the comfort to do this.
Mayor, are there other instances where a fee is set on the consolidated fee schedule and we're charging something different than what's on the consolidated fee schedule?
My understanding is that we've had, I think it's even a written agreement with the council that allows us to change the consolidated fee schedule without them ratifying it. So I don't know if
That
that
was
gives.
to do with certain, like, food items and stuff like that.
I was unaware of that and wasn't aware that there was a time that we've ever done that. But maybe
I'll,
I just missed out of the loop.
Well, we may have done it without your blessing.
Shh. Maybe we ought to look at that and come back.
I'll restate my motion then, then if we don't need it, then we won't. But I would hate for you not to be able to move ahead.
I think for this stage, they're preparing changes to the consolidated fee schedule that will be approved by the council with the new budget. And so I think now is a good time, they can make changes and then it will still come before the council before it's enacted.
And I think the only thing is if we find out we want to lower it, it's a council action and it's a big deal versus us just going back to it. But I wouldn't want to run against the grain of what Brian's concerned about. So I'd stick with the original motion and we'll come back and tell you in the fall how it's done.
So the motion's back on the table? I think Mr. Morgan had a comment.
Yeah, I was on a committee that recommended the district get out of the compost business. And what they were doing was just killed and drove the costs up very high, is they would haul the yard waste all the way over to their, over to the landfill, which is over by Alberta. And then they would make the compost, and then they would haul it back over here to sell. And that hauling of the compost just drives the cost through the roof. And so I just think what they've done here has been a huge success. I'd be very careful because when you have to start moving it around, it gets really expensive.
So Mr. Chair, I think if I understand Mr. Stewart's motion correctly, I think because we can't actually change the consolidated fee schedule in this meeting, I understood the motion to be that when the budget comes back, when the consolidated fee schedule comes back as part of the budget ordinance, that it's the council's intent, if this motion passes, for it to reflect a $3 resident fee and a $6 non-resident fee. And I think if that passes here, that the administration certainly can weigh in when you're considering the budget ordinance about if they have, in the meantime, some feedback about why that's not what they want. Is that your motion, Mr.
As a businessman, if you sell the other stuff, you usually raise your price.
Yeah, absolutely. Any further discussion on that?
I have some discussion about the fee, but not about the fee specifically, but I have a question about the program in general with regard to these prices.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote on this motion then, since that's a separate item. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously with some job excused. So we're now in a predicament that we're out of time and we haven't given any guidance on this. So what's our kind of deadline for giving you the guidance on these options?
Would like to implement one of these options, and again, option 4 and 5 probably can't start July 1st, but we would like to implement one of those options July 1st.
Make a motion that we adopt option 1 until you're ready to present us with another option that could be viable, really wise. Because we can change it in the middle of the year.
And we're happy to, if you want to give us direction on 4 or 5 and say, this is really where we want to go, and we can say, let's go to one of these options by January 1st, and that's fine. We can do that. Or if you want to choose one of the options and say, come back, or let us think about it for a couple of weeks, and we'll have another discussion about 4 or 5.
I would move that we do option 1, and I'm not ready to go on option 4 or 5 first.
That's fine.
I would just say that's great. I would probably prepare the council for that being a long time. Does that make sense? Without a second part to that motion, which would say, and eventually move to 4 or 5, I think we're going to consider that the final word unless you convene again and change it.
I mean, I started a discussion about the can, so we ended up on the compost. I don't know, and you could tell me a lot more. If a $1 increase in a can, what size of revenue that produces as compared to a $1 increase on a load of compost? I'm guessing the monthly can is a whole lot more money than the compost.
It is.
Our total revenue on compost is 12 or 13,000.
Yeah, so I don't, in my mind, that didn't solve
Well, no, it wasn't meant to.
my problem
It
there.
wasn't meant to.
And it maybe moved it that much, so I'm still back on the blue and the green can, not subsidized. So I'm not ready to vote on this yet.
I've got a comment, but I was waiting for a second before I make
1 second.
On the motion.
a second on the motion.
So, Mr. Stewart, just a clarification, is your motion to adopt option 1 over the short term, or are you proposing that that be our long-term guidance as
But
well?
now they say they need something.
Okay,
So this is a motion to adopt option 1. I'm not ready to adopt option 4 or 5. Personally, the council's ready to amend my motion to add one of them. Fine with that.
The motion, as I had caught it from Mr. Stewart, was to adopt option 1 until Public Works could propose an option that would be viable for the long term.
okay, is there a second to that motion?
Yes, but I'll question, are we gonna wait for Public Works to make that proposal, or are we gonna work together? Who's gonna, I mean, if they don't come back with a proposal, then it's over.
Was that a second?
Yeah. Okay. But I'm just questioning.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Mr. Hardy.
Okay, so many things are going on right now. Now, could I mean, I believe Public Works said all of these are financially sustainable in the long run. So it sounded like that met that part of the motion. All of these are sustainable, correct? All of these options that are before us are sustainable.
It's just preference?
The other thing that, well, right, preference in 4 and 5 can't be implemented immediately. My thinking on this is if the council wants to move to option 4 in the long term, then I would vote for option 1 in the short term. If we were more interested in going towards option 5 in the long run, then I would prefer to go to option 2 in the short term. And so kind of knowing where we want to head is going to impact how I vote for our short term.
The third option is not moving to either 4 or 5.
Right, and then there's always the option of saying neither 4 nor 5 is in our long-term plan.
I think it's important from the Public Works standpoint, and I'm going to support the mayor here on option 1 and just say from an ease of explanation for customer service and, you know, perhaps even council members talking with neighbors, I think option 1 is the easiest one to explain, and we can work with council staff and say, are there more specifics that you want to explore with option 4 and 5, and say, we'll come back in 2 months or whatever the date is that you want to set for us to work with your council staff and come back and have a longer term discussion about 4 and 5.
That's my motion. Is that the motion that they come back within 2 months?
Mr. Shepherd.
Looking at option 1, I think you probably just want to check it. If you have a black can with blue or green, and you have the blue and the green, it's $25, not $25.45. Am I reading that wrong?
It is 25. You're correct.
You're correct, it's 25.
That number right there should be 25.
If I went back in green can, it's $19, right? Back in blue, $20.
That's right. It's 9 months out of the year, and it is 14 the 3 months out of the year.
My question about all of this is, as I heard Commissioner Ivey talking about the diesel and the things that are involved here, I'm wondering about our recycling program. Yeah, we all feel nice and that's great, but what are we really accomplishing through this recycling? Sometimes I wonder about that. Are we really making that much of a difference? And that's a concern that I've got. Are we just doing it so we feel good, or what is the reality behind this program that we're doing? I'm struggling with that at some point.
Probably 2 months gives us some time to study that, and yet gives the council, the administration, option one, we need to do something right now.
And I agree with that. I lean toward option one myself.
So my response to that is similar to the comment I wanted to make after. I really appreciate the approach of, let's not go too quickly. Let's ease into this. Let's make sure that we don't expose our citizens to great liabilities. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate, I've lost it already, but the mayor was saying something about something earlier that I really thought was pertinent to this as well. But the point is I think it was your ship steering where, rather than doing this, let's make these minor changes. I think with the recycling program, yes, right now the overall market is pretty poor, and so it costs. We have to subsidize it more if we were to have this program. But in the past, we were doing pretty well with the arrangement. And I think part of it is just that long-term stability. Imagine if every time the market was really good, we buy all these cans, we implement the service, we buy the trucks, and we do this, and then the market drops out, and so we sell the cans away, or we throw them away, we do away with the program. A few years later, oh, well, let's do it again. So I think if we look at broad term, does it make sense to have these programs? I'm okay taking 2 months to look at this, but does it make sense to have these programs? Well, right now, a bunch of municipalities built a whole bunch of dumps, and there's so much overcapacity for dumps. It's hard. Everyone's running their own, massive dump, and it's driving down the cost for tipping fees. But if we, that's a probably a few decade quirk, but I mean it's kind of a quirk in the market system right now. But if we there may be some innovative solutions to that, where maybe you mothball some of them and for a time, and you build a coalition of various municipalities, and so you all use this one for a while, and then you all use this one once that. So there's some things we can do, but if we've made these long-term investments, and that right now is driving down the costs for these tipping fees, but that's artificially low, I would say, because of the glut in supply of these dumps. So I think by having these longer-term goals, where do we want to get? Do we want to be a community that offers yard waste recycling? I mean, really, when you get the triple line dumps and all of the stuff that the federal government says that you have to have in your dumps, and then we fill it with tree branches, does it really make sense to do that long term? And so I hope we take a long-term approach to this, and even if we have to subsidize a little in the meantime, let's look long range and have things that are sustainable long term.
Just to build off what you're saying, we started this recycling, the whole country got into recycling, and they're still into recycling. It's popular. Most people don't understand the dynamics of it, and it's changed because the cost of energy has come down to roughly half. If we had $100 barrel oil again, then you could process that plastic and it would be economical. But I would recommend that, like I mentioned before, if we can look into finding different ways to do things, including using the plastic in the roadways as we've seen advertised. So that instead of bailing them and storing them or putting them in the landfill, we can actually find a use for this that is practical.
I just want to respond to Mr. Hardy's comments. I'm not here saying we need to get away, we need to disband the recycling program or disband. I'm just saying, instead of continuing to subsidize it on the black can, let's just add $1 to each of those cans instead of taking it away, so they're more reflective of what their cost is, and then we keep doing it. I'm not saying I want to close them down at all, but I just am not in favor of continuing to push on the black can so people can do those. That's my argument. So there's some things I really like about option 4 and option 5, but I do like the idea of as Mr. Stewart's motion said, of settling on option 1 for the short term as the administration has recommended, and then after the budget's passed, coming back and having a real good discussion about where we want to go long term. So I would support the motion. Is there any further discussion?
Just one. I think if you charge the real price, whether it be like $9 a black can, what was it pay?
$8.45 for black, $6.78 for blue, and $7.72 for green.
If you charge that exact amount or something close to it, you could say, well, that's fair, you know?
But I haven't said that.
Okay.
I said $1. That's all I said.
Small shift.
I'm not.
But I mean, just in principle, if we try to.
Okay, that's your principle, not mine.
Yeah, you know, if something is transparent and cost recovery, you know, we charge for the service rendered. And so, you know, we could adjust them down to the actual cost, or maybe we could say that, you know, it doesn't matter what can we give you or what can we pick up, they're all the same price. Because we're coming out and we're going through the motions and so we're going to charge everybody, you know, $7 a can or $8 a can. The whole idea of subsidizing, I mean, we're doing that in the electric department with our base rates and subsidizing by taking the operating costs out of the profit of the electricity we sell. I think these things are complex. I sympathize with your idea, perhaps that the average guy who doesn't have the others is paying too much for the black can. But if someone wants to have 2 or 3 black cans and then throw all of their stuff in there, I wouldn't want to incentivize it so that they just go ahead and get black cans and put everything in there rather than actually putting it into the green or the recycling, because if we change the incentive, we may end up with people going, why bother? Why do anything but a black can?
And I want to know why. And if the dollar shifts from a black can to a blue can, it's no different cost. We're about 15 minutes behind. Can we go ahead and vote on the motion and then bring this back in July? Would that be acceptable to everyone? Do we need to bring it back in June so you have an answer for July?
Well, if you vote on it and pass, the deadline is not as critical because we can implement in January or February, right? We just need, whenever you do bring it back, you need to know it has a 6-month lead time. Is that correct?
Right. So what I'm understanding is you're voting on this and saying July 1st, we're going to implement this in the consolidated fee schedule with the budget adoption. We're going to come back and have a conversation, be it in July or whenever it is, and you're going to give us direction on where you want to go long term. Is it 4 or 5 or some other option long term? And this is more like a January implementation.
The pressure is off because it doesn't have to be January. It can be spring. And
one different time.
Matter of fact, my guess is they'd like a little more time anyway to make it happen.
Exactly. All right, all in favor?
There was a substitute motion on the table, so Mr. Stewart moved to amend his motion and say that Public Works come back in 2 months specifically with the recommendation, but there was no second on that.
Okay, so then now,
So we're looking for a second.
since there was no second, then that's not.
Well, we're still looking for sorry.
If that is the motion.
Ask one more question. Sure. So the current is not sustainable, right?
Correct.
So you need something to go forward on.
That's correct.
July.
That's correct.
That matches your pre-approved plan, if that makes sense.
So if I vote for So we need to clarify what the current motion is.
Well, if Mr. Connect's not gonna re-up this second, I'll second that motion. So the substitute motion being that not only are we directing that we move forward with option 1, but that we revisit this in a couple of months. And I like that more than the first one, so I'll second it unless someone else wanted to second it.
Okay, is that, that's okay with you? All right.
All in favor? Motion carries unanimously with Ms. Santiago excused. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
thank
much.
I know that's a difficult decision, so thank you for bringing that to a head.
I may have missed this, but I think there's still an open motion about the composting fee.
No, they voted on that.
Oh, did they vote? Okay, I must have been answering a question and I missed that, sorry.
Thank you again.
Next up, we have, an item, Stephen Sweetwood requests a zone change from the heavy commercial zone to LDR. This will be presented by Mr. Yost.
Oh.
The proposal you have before you is a request to a zone change from heavy commercial to low density residential for 0.279 or about 12,000 square feet of acres, 12,000 square feet of property located at 801 West, 500 South. This zone change is requested in order to facilitate the development of 4 townhomes on this site. The site is currently surrounded by the commercial manufacturing zone with an area of low density residential that has already been rezoned on the corner of 700 West and 500 South. The general plan for the area is residential, and the Franklin neighborhood plan designates this future land use to be low density residential. So this request is in line with the adopted future land use in the applicable neighborhood plan. The project plan has been reviewed both by Design Review Committee, where it received a conceptual approval, and by the Planning Commission, where it was approved conditional upon completing department review process and Design Review Committee final approval. No concerns have been raised from the neighborhood. The neighborhood chair expressed, the Franklin neighborhood chair expressed her consent to an approval of the project in the Planning Commission hearing, and the site is currently undeveloped as the former right-of-way of 800 West from 500 South to the railroad tracks. The front elevation of the proposed project is here, and the site plan shows 4 townhomes with landscaping and the required parking. Staff recommended to Planning Commission, and Planning Commission recommends to you approval of the requested zone change from heavy commercial to low density residential.
I've also heard from a couple constituents that live very near this and are supportive of it.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Yost. This item is going to be on the agenda on June 6th, so there's no action required. All right, let's move on to number 6. Ken Menlove requests street vacation of 17 South.
Thank you. So this request is actually to vacate the existing cul-de-sac street at 1780 South, which connects Industrial Parkway. The intention of this is to facilitate the development of some storage units on the site. Currently, this work. This is the existing site, and you can see that in 2006 there was a plat done to divide this property into 5 parcels, but the current owner has purchased all of these parcels, and for better site design and for better utilization of the site is requesting that the street be vacated so they can utilize that area as well. This is a proposed site plan that the applicant submitted that would allow them to better utilize this site. Staff recommended to the Planning Commission, based on the fact that there was no opposition or even any comment from the public on this particular project, to recommend approval to the council. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of this street vacation. In conjunction with this application, a project plan approval application was submitted as well. That was approved by the Planning Commission contingent upon the street vacation being approved by City Council. Any questions?
You just show, did you have a larger view seeing it relative to surrounding property?
So this is 1860 South. This is Industrial Parkway. Over here is the Novell building. So it's kind of a lone piece that has just sat vacant for about 11 years or so.
I think it's PIC zoning on the west side of Industrial Parkway, and it's M1 zoning. Is that right, M1 or M2 on the east side?
Yeah, so that M2 is on this side.
One time we were looking at something to go even further south that was going to incorporate all of that, weren't we, on that? Isn't there something, if I remember, maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but we were talking about changing the zoning for some of this, even where that building is.
This building, Gary?
Yeah.
So I believe all of this is in the PIC zone, the planned industrial commercial.
Well, we did recently, during your tenure, change that from M1 or M2 to PIC to try to prevent heavy industrial uses from coming up against those office uses and classroom uses.
Yeah, and didn't we have a project that was involved with that, or was it just the zone change?
Just the zone change.
Just
It
the
was
zone
preempted by staff.
Does this cause a problem for we're still in the PIC zone for this, for the other parcels here? Is that going to affect this area? Yeah. Can you see any ill effect of that?
No, that's already used industrially.
And it is, we should note that storage units are a permitted use in the PIC.
Who paid to build that street?
I believe that is a city street. This one, 1787, the developer at the time of when the plat was done. And then it was dedicated to the city.
Thank you.
This is on our agenda for June 6th. Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Item number 7 is a discussion on ordinance amending Provo City Code, change yard requirements, and Mr. Maxwell.
As directed by council, there was a committee meeting with 3 council members. And I think we only have one proposed ordinance to bring to you tonight instead of 4 different ones. The basic change is to apply the 20-foot rear yard and the allowance for the 15-foot encroachment for up to 150 square feet for lots that are 105 feet or less in depth. The feeling was that once you got beyond that depth on a lot, you really weren't pushing toward those rear property lines anyway. And so that allows, the narrower lots that are through the entire city. I had a map there that kind of illustrated it's not what heavy coverage, I don't know, maybe some of the council members can describe what they think of that. But it was kind of spread through the city, but not abundantly, I guess, anywhere. So this seemed to be the workable compromise on that text.
Right. So does it, are both those stipulations, so 20 feet and 15 feet, or what am I trying to ask? Does it?
Yeah, so it allows to combine 50 foot is still required for lots with depths greater than 105 feet.
So from 20 in the front, we still have to have 30 in the back for anything
Right.
105 feet or more.
Right. You still could shift it. You could still do 20 in the back and 30 in the front. So it doesn't take that away. But then for lots of a depth that have a depth of 105 feet or less, then it's only 40 feet. For some reason that's not underlined, but and then if you come down to rear yard, it says 20 feet except that up to 100 square feet. I guess it's 100 that we came up with.
Right.
100 square feet of the primary building may extend an additional 5 feet toward the rear property line on lots with an average depth of 105 feet or less, so long as the extension is not more than 1 story or 15 feet in height. And I put the wrong one, I apologize. There's another clause in there that you have on yours, Brian, right? The one that deals with the measure, oh no, I know where that is, okay. Never mind, that's the next slide, I'll show you.
Yeah.
Okay, in doing that, we notice there are 2 other changes we're going to need to do, but these have to go back to the planning commission. The first one's dealing with side yard on corner lots. And make that word the same as it does on the front yard. Because that would have still been 20 feet from the property line, it would have been confusing. The second one deals with the patios, and we have to deal with that separately. But the idea, we added the word roofs instead of just patio, just to clarify that. But patio roofs may project up to 12 feet into required rear yard, but no closer than 8 feet to the rear property line as measured from the patio roof edge, and provided the said structure is not more than 1 story in height. The other definition there, it's a roof cover, that seemed unnecessary. So that will be a separate ordinance going before the planning commission next month, and then you'll see that come back after that's approved.
Are we, as a committee, when you met, were you able to define average, again, so that says 50 feet for parcels or lots with an average depth greater than 105.
Yeah, basically you measure midpoints of the rear yard, midpoint of the front yard, and draw a line. And that's that distance. Does that make?
For a trapezoid, that would work. Some yards have, it covers what, 99% for most things.
Yeah.
So
we didn't talk a lot about a lot that had a halfway through the lot, it drops down 10 feet and back. We didn't draw a line.
That would, I think, Bill, would leave community development in the position of interpreting average on an odd lot like that. Is that right, Brian? You see?
Yeah, for instance, you had one side of the yard was 90 feet and the other was 110. The average depth's 100. Because the midpoints would be, if you
could get like a cul-de-sac, it just takes a little math to figure out.
Just so I don't have to say this tonight and cause confusion in that meeting. I don't know why I didn't catch this before. The first 2 lines of this are drafted as if we weren't deleting the first 2 lines above. So I've got another version that we'll actually put on the screen where everything after the strikeout is just redlined. Because basically what we're doing is we're deleting everything above 2 and inserting a completely new section. So we don't need the red and black text in those first 2 lines. But other than that, it doesn't do anything different.
I think originally that was just to show that wasn't new, but yeah, It needs to be redlined the other way.
Does it read differently?
No, it doesn't change any of the words. I got rid of the capital T and the capital E that don't need to be struck through because they're not really there.
Right.
So it doesn't change any substance, it'll just look a little bit different.
So you have that available to
Mr. Lawson.
Sure, I can send it to Bryce right now.
So it'll be one example tonight.
So there's only gonna be one version on the screen tonight.
Right.
Mr. Kent.
So we had to draw the line somewhere, and the idea was to give those properties, regardless of where they were located. We talked about, do we just look at a certain part of town? Do we look at certain zones like R16, R18? But it wasn't a matter of location, because these things are all over the city, even though you might argue they're concentrated in the center part of town. The map that Brian brought showed that there are numerous places all over the city with, it could be R16, it could be R10, that somehow end up with a short depth on the lot. And anyone who has a depth below less than 105 feet, we're giving them a break, because they're having some difficulty. For example, the guy that came in who wants to build on the west side, he's got this wonderful lot.
It's 102 feet deep.
Yeah, it's 102 feet deep, and it's really wide. And if this allowed him the flexibility to build his home as designed without having to rearrange everything with a separate detached garage just to meet our ordinance.
I'm a little nervous we're making an ordinance for that one. So is that in your discussion tonight?
No.
I think I've got a lot that's 107 and this is not gonna work now.
The other one we talked about in committee was my personal experience in Mazer neighborhood, where my lot was 45 wide and 85 deep.
That's fun.
And be able to add on to the back of the house, to the bedroom or the kitchen, or depending on if your house might be any room that you want to add on to. And having that flexibility, because having a small lot is a problem, and being able to do something to make your house more livable is nice. And so this gives them that flexibility on a small lot.
And as we studied it, 105 was real close, seemed to be a cutoff of the 40% coverage area. That if we start, that was the protection for that. It was going to keep us far enough away from the other neighborhoods. So the other houses on the other side. And so 105 seemed to be right at the threshold there where it wouldn't apply after that.
If you did the minimum width on an R110, you'd be about 90 by 113. So it wouldn't include all the R110s.
So if the 40% rule takes care of it on its own.
After 105.
But if it takes care of it at 113, seems like we're punishing that 8 feet right there.
Was it 113? Was that the rule?
That's what the depth of an R110 is if you're 90 feet wide, 90 by times 113. And 105 is still an arbitrary number. I mean, it's just kind of looking at it. If you went to 110, it would probably double the number of lots. So, I mean, there was.
They could do it.
They could do it. I mean, it's
So
still.
we're trying to get them to not to do it, or we're trying to get them to do it?
Well, in saying that, it's still probably less than 20% of the city. It'd be a rough guess that probably is less than 10% that would be affected by this. But anyway, so.
I want to thank all the committee members. I know that you took extra time out of your days to do this. I've been in those committees before. I truly want to thank you for your efforts. I appreciate compromise. There's times where we don't get anywhere, and it's a problem. I look at this, I still don't have a strong feel for 105. If we had, I've heard from the committee meetings, you looked at some pictures, and so you kind of got a feel for 105. I don't have a feel for what does 105 look like, what does it feel like. Other than that, assuming that 105 is large enough, then, I mean, this really has just about everything I want in it. thing though is I struggle a little bit. I think it's far more complicated than it needs to be. And even on the things that are larger than the 105, you still, as long as you're 30 feet, have 30 feet of setback, you can still build, you know, all the way back. It's not
20 feet. You can do that now, today.
Right. 20 feet. Do you also get the 15 foot? Okay. So it seems too complex to me. And if we feel like 105 is sufficiently large, that a house isn't going to be 20 feet from the road and the 20 feet from the back, then it doesn't seem like it would do much, I guess. And I'd rather see, you know, if we felt like, hey, at 105 feet, you know, the rear yard should be 30 feet, rather than letting the sliding around. Anyway, I think it's more complex than it needs to be, but it has pretty much everything I think that we want. So, you know,
So is the question the 105 feet, why that, or?
Yeah, for me, really, before I will feel comfortable making a vote, I really want to understand what 105 is. I guess I support it, but I think it is more complex than it needs to be. But anyway, if I guess, yes, if I could get a little better feel for what does 105 look like.
Was there a particular reason why 105 was chosen?
No. It just, I mean, we tried to, I guess, what would be this number where we're really concerned, again, it gets into that coverage, 40%. If you can move the backyard, the front yard up anyway, where does it then become excessive? And I think what we talked about is where do the lots become deep enough that it probably won't come into play enough.
Okay, so
that makes sense.
Earlier in the discussion, we had the 40%, and you talked about the 8 feet. So what if we made it 113? Then you have at least a reason.
There was some discussion in that meeting, in that first meeting, and you were talking about properties of 100 and properties of 110. I think that's how you ended up 105, was just saying, let's have it was an arbitrary dividing line.
Right, but I'm saying that if you actually have a nexus with 40% coverage at 113, then you have a rationale for picking a number rather than being arbitrary.
So 113 is if you take an R110 and have it at the minimum width, then you reach 113.
I'm gonna check my math on that. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
113, let's do it.
90 times 113.
For 115, I mean, just round it up, give an extra 2 feet.
Where the nexus, though, rationale of 113 fits something.
Okay, all right. I like 113 more than 105, so support that.
Okay.
I should mention, we do have a request from Ms. Santiago, who's on the committee, that if there are any proposed changes, it would be her request that the committee gets another crack at it. Whatever.
I'm still be here to go ahead.
I think that 113 would actually help her out in some of the things that she wants to accomplish, keeping it further
I just don't
away.
think it's fair to avoid that. She chose to be gone. If they're changing to 113, that needs a motion, I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to, I guess, change.
So 113 was, that's.
8 feet bigger on the lot.
And they still can't get any closer.
So it doesn't change anything except where we divide the big and small lots.
Yeah. So it doesn't change how we can get as close. It's the same closeness whether it's 105 or 113.
I'm not sure lot was 110.
Yeah, if you had a lot that's 110, right now, the way that it's written, you can't get within 20 feet. And then you can get within 15, but just one story at 150 square feet.
But it's still only 120 or 15 feet to the edge of the lot. So I don't see that that's the issue with Kim.
So you think she would be?
I think she'd be fine with
Okay, we have a motion to change the default to 113. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Harding. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Right now, this motion only applies to what we will see later tonight.
What the default
What the
draft,
default will
which
be.
is so change it tonight. Hopefully, we won't feel the need to, but any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously with this one excused. So this will be.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm kind of curious, maybe Mr. Jones can weigh in on this, if it's appropriate for me to offer an incentive if this is concluded, like within 10 or 15 minutes.
Hey, I'd be up for that. Sounds good to me.
I can go from anything from a T-shirt to for you and a guest. Whatever Brian tells me crosses the line.
It's gonna be a long night tonight, so any item that we can get through quickly would be great. I think we do have a closed session, do we not?
Yes, we do have one item that deals with potential purchase of property and or litigation, depending on how things go. So we do have one item.
We need a motion for a closed session. Okay, motion by Mr. Stewart, is there a second by Mr. Van Buren? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously.